It's late in the evening, on June 6th, 2022. Two men are riding their bikes along a path by a creek in the city of Menlo Park in California's San Francisco Bay Area. Suddenly, they come across a body lying face down in some bushes just off the path. They go over and shake the person. When they realize it's not a mannequin, they call the cops. Menlo Park is an affluent town with tree-lined streets and houses that look like this. And before you even see the victim, the biggest question in this case is, how did a dead person end up here? Well, as we'll find out, there were signs pointing to a pretty obvious answer. But unfortunately, no one had put the clues together until now. We need to go back a little over a month to May 4th, 2022, just after midnight. Two men driving a white Volvo station wagon approach a traffic light at the corner of Ravenswood Avenue and Woodland Way. A surveillance camera on a house captures them, stopping at the red light. It turns green, and they drive through the intersection. But instead of continuing straight, they make a U-turn and start driving towards the camera. You can see the car go out of frame. Seconds later, a woman walking her dog comes into the frame. She stops when she sees the car coming back towards her. She tries to get the attention of the driver, but he doesn't see her. He continues driving directly at her. On the left side of the screen, you can see the brake lights of the car as it approaches. There's a loud horn, and the driver slams on the brakes. But it's too late. The car hits the woman and sends her flying. Her dog runs away. The driver jumps out and immediately runs back to his car and speeds off. The driver's passenger can be seen leaning forward in his seat. The woman lies motionless on the road. The driver gets back in the car and they both speed off. This time he turned right onto Woodland Way. A neighbor goes outside and sees the woman lying in the street. He runs over and starts performing first aid. She was taken to the hospital, but died from her injuries a few days later. She was identified as 59-year-old Michelle La, a beloved mother and grandmother. Menlo Park police released the surveillance footage and asked for help identifying the driver. For anyone who has ever watched an episode of CSI, you know that after someone dies, the priority is to collect as much evidence as possible from the victim. In this case, there wasn't much to collect. Investigators could tell that she had been hit by a car, but they didn't have any paint chips, glass, fiber evidence, or anything else that could tie the car or the driver to the crime. But there was something Michelle was carrying in her hand when she was struck. As officers collected her belongings from the scene, one of them noticed a business card in her hand. They ran it through their systems and learned it belonged to a local chiropractor named Dr. Ava, which was odd because Michelle wasn't a patient there. That made them wonder, why would she have the card on her? They went to the chiropractic office and looked at the security footage. Sure enough, they saw Michelle at the clinic that same day. She had visited the chiropractor for treatment. The doctor told police that Michelle had come in complaining of back pain. She had been suffering from severe pain for weeks and was in desperate need of relief. Ava gave her an epidural steroid injection in the lower part of her back. Then Michelle left feeling better and made an appointment to return in 3 days. But we all know that Michelle never made it home. What drew Michelle to Dr. Ava? Why did she become a patient? May never know. But it's a good question, because here's where things start getting strange. According to her LinkedIn page, Dr. Eva graduated from Palmer College of Chiropractic in 2018. She had been practicing in California for 4 years prior to the incident. So it's likely that the local residents knew about her practice. But there was another chiropractic office just a block away from where Michelle lived. So why did Michelle go all the way to Dr. Eva's office when there was a closer option? One thing that may have made her choose Dr. Eva is that Dr. Eva specialized in treating pain from car accidents, which brings us back to the surveillance footage. The footage at the doctor's office shows that Michelle arrived at the office alone, but when she left, she got into the passenger side of a white Volvo station wagon. The driver was a man we'll eventually learn is named Brian Edward Jones. He dropped her off a few blocks from her house. Then Michelle walked home. Later that night, Brian picked her back up and drove her to the place where she was hit. That still doesn't explain why Michelle got in a car with a total stranger, though. What kind of person would do such a thing? Before we get to that, let me explain how Brian Edward Jones became a suspect in the first place. As you probably already guessed, Brian was the driver of that Volvo. His license plate had been captured on multiple surveillance cameras in the area. Police knew it was his car. They just didn't know who he was. But here's where things start getting interesting. You see, in addition to releasing the surveillance footage of the hit and run, the police also put out a bulletin about the case. This is a common tactic used by law enforcement. If they can't solve the case, they reach out to the media to try and gather tips from the public. And sure enough, someone came forward with some valuable information. They told police that the person who matched the driver's description was Brian Jones, a resident of Menlo Park. He was a 65-year-old man who had recently moved to California from Utah. This is where things get weird. Police went to Brian's house to question him. They knocked on the door and introduced themselves. They explained that they wanted to ask him some questions about the hit and run. Brian opened the door, looked them up and down, then closed the door in their faces. At that point, the officers knew that Brian was a suspect, so they got a warrant and searched his house. Inside, they found him hiding in the closet. They also found the white Volvo and a number of Michelle's personal belongings. They arrested Brian and charged him with murder. But there was a problem. Technically, they hadn't solved the case yet. They had Brian in custody, but they couldn't charge him with murder without being able to prove that he intentionally hit Michelle with his car. Unfortunately for Brian, the answer was hidden in plain sight. In fact, it was hiding in the places he tried to hide. When police searched Brian's house, they found photos of him and Michelle together, but it wasn't the photos that were interesting. It was what those photos revealed about Brian, as detectives started looking into him. They discovered that he was a registered sex offender. His crimes included unlawful sexual conduct, forcible oral copulation, and kidnapping to commit rape. He served 15 years in prison for these crimes and was released in January of 2021. That's when he moved to California. Let us take a step back here and talk about the incident that landed Brian in prison in the first place. It was August 2003 in Salt Lake City, Utah. A woman was jogging near her apartment complex. When she was attacked from behind and dragged into some bushes, a man had approached her and forced himself on her. When he was done, he grabbed her cell phone and ran off. DNA testing later confirmed that the attacker was Brian Edward Jones. But here's the weird part. While he was waiting for his trial to begin, he committed another sexual assault. This time, he followed a 14-year-old girl into a dressing room at Target. When she tried to leave, he blocked the exit and attacked her. The girl fought back, and Brian fled. That attack happened on March 26, 2004. 5 days later, he was arrested in connection with the first attack. That's actually important for later. In February 2006, he pleaded guilty to 5 charges, including rape and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. That's where he stayed until his release in January 2021. That's why when he was questioned by the police about Michelle's death, he said that he had nothing to do with it. He claimed he had no idea who she was. He agreed to take a polygraph test and passed, but as we know, he failed the real test. The photos in his house proved he knew Michelle personally. So the question becomes, how did they know each other? Why did he invite her to ride in his car? And finally, why did he kill her? We don't have a definitive answer for those questions. But what we do know is that the reason Brian was able to get away with killing Michelle was the same reason he got away with attacking 2 women 19 years earlier. He thought he was smart enough to cover his tracks, but thanks to advances in science, he was finally brought to justice. When Brian was arrested, he was already a suspect in another case. So the 2002 murder of 24-year-old, he was convicted of first-degree murder and is serving a life sentence. Now, this is where things get really weird. The creepy part of the story isn't over yet. Not only did Brian use the same tactics in both attacks, but there was a good chance he could have gotten away with them if not for a tool called forensic genealogy. You see, at the time of the attack in 2002, Brian's DNA was added to a national database. But there was a problem. Back then, there was no match. No one in the system was close enough to him for the database to flag him as a potential match. In fact, that wouldn't happen for another 20 years. But after his arrest in connection with Michelle's death, police went back to the unsolved cases and started searching for matches. They sent samples of the DNA recovered from Michelle's body to a lab. They compared that DNA to the national database and got a match. It was Brian. His DNA was 4 billion times more likely to appear in this sample than any other individual. At the time of his arrest, he was already a suspect in 6 other cases from Utah and California. All of them were similar to the attack on Michelle. But none of them were solved because of that same DNA issue. But now that Brian was in custody, they could link all the cases together. On September 13th, 2022, Brian pleaded not guilty to all charges. He remains in jail without bail. His trial is set to begin in April 2024. By now, you might be wondering, what about Michelle's family? How did they react to hearing that Brian was behind the attack? Here's what Michelle's brother Ron Clinkscale told the media, quote, "I hope that they throw the book at him. He took my sister away from us. My sister was a beautiful person. She was a great mom and a great grandma." He says that since her death, their family has struggled to move forward. Everyone keeps replaying the incident over and over in their heads, wondering if they could have done anything to prevent it. Ron is helping to keep Michelle's memory alive through a foundation that he started with his wife. Their goal is to help victims of crime, and that's the most recent update in this case. If you want to see more updates as they become available, stay tuned. Thanks for watching.